Hi there, thanks again for tuning in to this YouTube channel where I talk about my sketchbooks through the years. The one that we'll be discussing today is sketchbook number 7. So this one covers January 2020 to July 2020. And this one, unfortunately, we're in the grips of COVID-19 by this point, but still some lovely sketches of London when I'm managing to get out in between the lockdowns. So don't forget to subscribe and leave some lovely comments, and thanks again. Sketchbook number 7. So this is from January 2020 to July 2020. And we're really dealing with, for obvious reasons, because of COVID-19, we're dealing with a lot of sketches from London. There's no trips involved, unfortunately, just because of this this pandemic. A lot of trips were planned, but unfortunately, a lot of trips had to be cancelled. I really wanted to go back to Paris and Lisbon, and I had something booked as well for my brother and his best friend, the three of us. We used to do trips occasionally, at least twice a year. We wanted to go to Budapest, but unfortunately all that had to be cancelled. So we're really dealing with London, and the first couple of sketches in this book are from museums, because it is the beginning of the year. And as I mentioned in previous books about, you know, through the winter months, it's very cold, and for any sort of urban sketcher or anyone that likes to be outside documenting the world, it can be bitterly cold, especially in London around that sort of time. So I'm heading back to the V&A. I'm heading back to the Maritime Museum in Greenwich, putting together little posts. And by this point, I'm putting together little, you know, it's not just the sketch, but it's how you sort of present the sketch, how you post the sketch. So this one in particular, I did it in, I think, 10 different sequences. So you can see the beginning of this, and then it sort of builds up over time, so you can see the finished result. So it's really just another sort of interesting way of presenting it on Instagram. I remember this one vividly, being a very, very cold afternoon, because it was down a tight alleyway in the sort of banking district, the central part of London, Jamaica Wine House. So this particular pub used to be a coffee shop hundreds of years ago, and it stood on the same spot. My friend Jim put me onto this one, actually, London Oratory in South Kensington. So this is just around the corner from the V&A. And I wouldn't have thought of a church as a place to sort of do a sketch or document different things. But actually, the midday mass, not many people in there. And with certain colour pens, this was one of the more successful sketches. I really do like this one. Just getting the detail in there. And I think the viewpoint, the angle of these candlesticks, that sort of regimented way, and the way it kind of draws up at that particular angle, I was really pleased with. This was a sketch that didn't go quite so well, filling up some pages of colour before I left the house. This one started off well enough, drawing busts and statues, heads. This one not so much. So when it got to this stage, I was really trying to encapsulate this guy here. So I sort of abandoned this particular page, but it's okay, it's nice as an experiment. And I really wanted to have that idea of kind of overlapping, but it didn't really work on this occasion. So I had a bit of a break and went back. And I really decided to go all out, and I'm kind of glad that this accident happened, really, because by this time it was getting a little bit late. So I decided to document this guy in full, in detail, and then have a little bit of fun with the background, because I was running out of time. And I was really interested in this stage of development, my own development, of just putting in graphic elements whether it be sort of thick lines, bright colours like pinks and yellows and oranges. And it's just another sort of thing, really. It's just another interest to keep my interest, and whenever I post these things onto Instagram, just to keep the interest for my followers as well. But then have moments of going back to what I normally do, of filling the page. British Museum. Again, just painting up a little bit before I head out. British Museum again. These two heads either side are in gold metallic pen. So you can see, if I have it at that angle, you can see them in more detail. And again, if you look through and find this particular post, it's sort of 3 quick shots of this head first, then this one, then this one. And I'm just having a little bit of fun, really. And then I get into, this is just before lockdown, and it's sad that it couldn't continue, actually, because there's so many great pubs in London, in central London in particular. I wanted to document the interiors. This is the Salisbury pub, just up from the West End, St Martin's Lane. And I got in here just as it was opening, so there's nobody in apart from the staff. So I had a quick glass of lemonade and got started on this sketch. Some pubs are just steeped with history. Too long to go into on this post now, but on this video, but there was a really nice morning. Nunhead Cemetery again, just messing around with the backgrounds, really, with lines, just having a bit of fun. So really, I've got to grips with the Posca pen. I'm using this at all times by now. So I'm thinking of other methods of having fun and documenting things, and really thinking about what would my followers like to see, and how can I sort of extend my knowledge of a place like London. So really just a mixture of quite a few things, really. And again, with this background. So it's not just a block, a patch of colour. It's sort of lines, just to make it more interesting. This is Queen's House again in Greenwich, a bust of Oliver Cromwell, just from different angles. Hastings Museum. Seeing my friend again for the weekend. And this is probably the week before the first lockdown. British Museum. Capturing the whole statue, but just having it on separate pages. I don't think I'd ever done that before. But again, just trying something different. Outside the British Museum. I don't think I ever posted this one. It's funny when you look back through these old sketchbooks, some things you never got round to posting, and some you do. Inside the Princess Louise pub in Holborn, Samuel Smith's brewery that owned quite a few. It's quite a big pub chain in London. They own quite a few historic buildings, and the interiors, they spend a lot of money and renovate them. So I wanted to document this one, and they have different sort of dividers, and there's booths in between each divider. So that's a wonderful pub if you ever get the opportunity. A strange 1920s concrete style bus stop in Hastings that caught my eye. So we're into the throes of lockdown now, unfortunately, so no travelling, nobody's really allowed to go out, apart from to the supermarket for food. So this is really, this is one of the first drawings that I made. The front window, looking out onto the street. This is the view from my own bedroom window, looking up the road towards the top. Not really anything else to do, unfortunately. This is the back garden, a little bit overgrown. So me and my housemates had plenty of time to, through the first lockdown and the second, to do something about this. But at the time it was very overgrown towards the back. It was a very narrow garden, but very long. And again, just having some fun, just trying to be as inventive as possible while you're sort of sat around, blocks of colour, and concentrating on a bit of hedgerow there. That was quite a satisfying one to do, actually. So this was Nunhead Cemetery. I've talked about this on various occasions. I used to go back. It was only a 5-minute walk for me, just round the corner, when the first lockdown was lifted, around about May time 2020. So it was a nice way to escape for a couple of hours, get some fresh air. Really documenting there's huge parts of this cemetery that were just left to overgrow, and different sort of tree trunks going through gravestones, things kind of collapsing. Real detailed work on these, because you could spend as long as you like in there, really. So I used to take this little fold-up stool that I still have and sit there, bottle of water, sandwiches if you're staying for quite a while. This was my my old local, Skians Irish pub, fantastic place. So we're coming out of the lockdown now, but at the time, if you walk past this road towards Nunhead Cemetery this way, and you can see the city, very enticing, but still not allowed to go. Nunhead Cemetery again. And I'm discovering by this point that it was quite intentional at the beginning to have to fill the whole page, but just to fill the whole page literally with marks. And I quickly realised that that's not always the case. I think you do have to have some bits of breathing space, if you like, just to make the sketch come alive, because otherwise you're just kind of filling it with lots of marks that don't really make any sense after a while. So it's a kind of a less is more method, which I talk about quite often. Again, just a road at the end of my road. So people aren't still not really coming out much. They're popping out to get provisions or whatever they need to, but it's still quite quiet. This is a sketch that one of the first sketches when we were allowed to venture back into the city. So this is from Wapping and on the Thames pathway on the north side, walking back towards Tower Bridge. So it was a really hot summer day, and this was one of the first sketches back in the city. So I was so glad to be back and just to be walking around. It was a little bit of a ghost town, I must admit, once I did get back into central London around Covent Garden. Very eerie. And this one as well, same experience. The banking district, so this is sort of Bank of England is this way, and I think that's Lloyd's building there. Normally would be filled with people coming out of offices on their lunch hour, eating their sandwiches, grabbing an hour in sort of pubs and restaurants, but there was nothing like that. Very strange experience. And again, down a little alleyway, Royal Courts of Justice. Trying to tackle interesting viewpoints, really. Interesting compositions, angles. Fleet Street. Again, very quiet. So normally it would take at least 2 hours because I'm tackling with the dot-to-dot method that I mentioned in previous videos of where things are going to go. This needs to go here, but that needs to go here because that needs to be there. But because the noise was less, because the traffic wasn't so dominant, and there are less people as well on the streets, you could actually accomplish what you wanted to in pretty much half the time. Not as many distractions. Just outside St Paul's Cathedral, again another quiet afternoon. So I'm really taking advantage of this. We're allowed to be in the city now, and because I am freelance, I do work from home. I don't have to be in the city. I don't have to be in an office. I can jump on a train whenever I'm not too busy, to document different parts of the city. So I'm really taking advantage at this point. And again, Kerry Street, this is at the back of the Royal Courts of Justice. 4 telephone boxes, all in different styles from different sort of different centuries or different eras. So it's quite a curious sight to see 4 all together in different styles, and it does attract quite a few tourists. But it's a very quiet street, and there's a pub opposite called the 7 Stars. This was, I think, just off Russell Square, Bloomsbury Square. I was never quite happy with this sketch. I think I posted it much later. I think it was probably the colour combination. This one, just waiting on a friend, Lincoln's Inn Field. This was a gold metallic pen. I had some really nice comments through Instagram from my followers. I think it was because of the composition and the choice of pen as well. But that was quite a nice, satisfying. It didn't take me very long either, maybe 40 minutes, because there isn't a whole lot to it. But really trying to sort of push the boundaries of what a typical page can do, what the pens can do. This one, I think, in Sketchbook 9, fairly recently, I did another sketch of this. This was the first one, exactly the same angle, the same spot, but I was never really satisfied with it. And sometimes that happens, of the mall looking up towards Buckingham Palace. This one of Trafalgar Square. So still pretty quiet. This is sort of lunch hour time, not many people sat around. This is interesting because I'm dealing with water, and these Posca pens that I'm using, so they're not brush pens, they're not pencils, they're not anything that you can create that sort of flow of water. So really I'm kind of tackling as best I can with a Posca pen, which is very direct. As you can see, the sort of water coming out of this guy's mouth here. So very, very little happening, but just little dots, little lines to try and encapsulate that. So on occasion, trying to challenge myself with things like this. This is a typical scene in the city. They're always knocking something down and building something else. This is Piccadilly, just around the corner from Piccadilly Circus. It's always interesting to document these moments. The city ever changing. This is Chinatown. I didn't really like this sketch too much, and I'm still unsure about it. I had a lot of lovely comments and likes on Instagram when I did post it. I think it's the colour combination. I think it's the red and the pink are too close in tone to make it really work. These hundreds of lanterns I wanted to encapsulate. And there's so many more, but I think the whole thing got lost a little bit. But it was a nice afternoon. An old pub again in Covent Garden, Lamb and Flag. This one didn't open for quite a while after the first lockdown because it's quite a small pub, and there are quite a lot of small pubs in London that just didn't open really because of the capacity. We're going through a transition of places, restaurants, pubs, slowly opening, but with certain restrictions. So that was a very strange moment of quiet. Normally, this pub is very popular with lots of people at this time of year stood outside. So this one, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and it occurred to me that I hadn't been up to Abbey Road for some time, for some years actually. So I decided to venture up to St John's Wood. And I did a bit of research beforehand because normally this is a hive of activity with tourists walking over the famous zebra crossing and the traffic as well, disrupting all the traffic. But there was none of that really. There weren't many tourists because we're kind of out of a lockdown in the UK, but there aren't that many tourists venturing over to London. So it was very quiet, and I did a bit of research beforehand, as I say, with Google Street Maps to try and figure out the best position where I could stand. And it was a perfect afternoon. It was very hot. There was a lamppost behind me that I sort of stood up against, and it took probably about an hour and a half. So that was a really satisfying afternoon. Very nice memories. And this one as well, I did this on 2 occasions, 2 visits, because the tide was coming in. I got the tide times wrong, typical of me. And this green pen I didn't use too much because it was a slightly thicker nib at 0.9 rather than 0.7. But because it was the foreground section that I was trying to create, I didn't really have a problem with it. And then the gold colour of the bridge, that was on the 2nd visit a couple of days later. So this was a real 2-parter. Blackfriars Bridge, I think, in a gold metallic pen. And the composition, you can see the big splodge mark there. So I was pressing down. This happens occasionally, very rarely actually, but when you're pressing down, when the ink isn't coming out of the pen enough, and you sort of press it down for more ink to come out, and more ink came out than I intended. So I just tried to sort of incorporate it into the sketch, and sometimes that happens. So this one, by this point, you know, because we are sort of coming in and out of various lockdowns and we're not allowed to travel anywhere really. So this sketchbook and Sketchbook 8 are really London based. So I'm wanting to get into the research of London, not just your typical venues and your tourist attractions. So I would always quite often go onto Google and search for various hidden gems, if you like. And this is called the Hardy Tree. So it's just around the corner from King's Cross station. And it's encircled by gravestones placed by the novelist Thomas Hardy. So in the late 1800s, the rail system over here was experiencing growth. It was the Victorian age. Everything was expanding, more people coming into the city. So as a result of that, they decided to move some of the headstones that lay on the outskirts of the proposed rail network, the line. And the young apprentice, Thomas, was put in charge of coming up with a solution to the problem. So I guess they sort of left him to it, and it still stands. So these gravestones go all the way around this tree trunk, and it's fenced off by a little sort of iron fence that goes all the way, and circles all the way around. But it's a great little discovery, and I love finding things like this. As I say, little hidden gems of London, and every city has these, and they're just great to document, you know, visually interesting. So I immediately made the trip. Again, Borough Market, slightly different composition. I used to live only a 10-minute train ride away from this place, and it's such a hive of activity. So this was starting to get back to normal by this stage. We're out of, I think, the 2nd lockdown. We had several over here, unfortunately. So again, just documenting it. You know, Borough Market was on the same site for over 900 years, I think. Selling fresh produce, you know, fish, meat, poultry, vegetables, everything you can imagine really nowadays, surrounded by fantastic restaurants and pubs. So it's a great area to, if you're taking a little sketchbook, you're sketching people, if it's just for an hour or so, if you're killing time, or if you wanted to spend a little bit longer for a couple of hours to sketch some of the lovely architecture and the features there, the Victorian ironwork. View under the Millennium Bridge. This one didn't particularly work, but I quite like the central composition on the page. looking over towards Tate Modern. So in the background at the steps would be St Paul's Cathedral. Another one that didn't really work, this was a huge pillar that I was sat on the steps. This is Covent Garden where a lot of the acts perform. Again, waiting for someone, and I just thought I'd get the pens out. But it wasn't hugely successful. I'm kind of challenging the boundaries of composition really and what to put on the page. But it wasn't a particularly successful one. I never posted it. And this one, Regent's Park Canal, sort of winding round, and the old gasworks. And for some reason, these colour pens really sort of work well together. The purple and the pink. And I've had a lot of success with this combination with various sketches in the past. And this was a really nice summer morning. Made the trip up there. Lots of joggers sort of running around this bit, and actually a guy that sort of stopped once he realised what I was doing and what I was sketching. And it turned out that he followed me on Instagram and we had a quick chat. That's quite a nice guy. So I have some really nice memories of that particular day. Clapham Common Bandstand. Again, just little curiosities, little sort of hidden gems, and dealing with foliage and of the trees behind. So the darker area where lots of shadows, obviously you're sort of hatching a lot more to create that illusion of depth. And then the rest of it, you're just sort of little sort of suggestive marks. It's very time consuming, but actually quite satisfying. Wellington Arch, Hyde Park. Again, just dealing with 3 pens, deciding which colour you're going to use. So you have the sort of war memorial statue in the foreground. Then in the sort of middle distance, you have the arch. And then in the background, tiny bit of background there, you have the trees. Again in gold. This was another interesting one as well. I didn't post this, but it's basically, it's in Audley, I think it's, yes, Audley Square, just off Hyde Park. It's a very unassuming lamppost that has quite a strange dark history. So during the Cold War in the 50s, the Soviet KGB had numerous agents working in London. So these agents, after gaining their information, they needed a way to pass it discreetly to their superiors. And this was one method that they used. So basically they had a key, and it was really like a letterbox, but encased in a lamppost. So whenever they had a fresh letter or something new to report, they would have a bit of chalk, and on the base of the lamppost, they would cross it with an X to show that there were new messages in there. Again, just really strange hidden gems, strange bits of history connected with London. And these were called dead letterboxes. Again, just really strange sort of narrow alleyways. Very curious one called Wardrobe Place, just around the corner from St Paul's. Hammersmith Bridge. That was quite a nice afternoon. So people are beginning to venture out again, starting to sort of sit outside restaurants, socially distanced, obviously, but sort of getting back into the swing of things by this stage. And I mean, this is just a tree in Peckham Rye Park. Sometimes it's not all about venturing into the city and trying to encapsulate some great bit of architecture or some unusual part of the city. Sometimes it's just about sitting in your local park. So this was a really nice sketch that took an hour or so. People having picnics, things kind of starting to get back to normal now. kids climbing the trees. Really nice afternoon. And again, back to the same spot as the Wellington Arch. So this one is just round the corner from the Wellington Arch. Lots of war memorials, different sculptures, different monuments, and this is a fairly recent one, World War II Airman Memorial. So this isn't very old at all, and it's fantastic if you ever get the chance to see it. Just on the outskirts of Hyde Park. And I think that's it. So that was Sketchbook number 7. So thanks again for watching this short film. Again, we've dealt with basically the COVID-19 horrible experience. So really we're sort of in full lockdown, coming out of several lockdowns, at least in the UK. And we're heading towards Sketchbook 8, which is another book full of London-based drawings. So join me for that one, and thanks again.